as Africans, our role models have been demonized by certain groups of people as dictators, as violent terrorists, as they present to us puppets or oppressors as our role models, and this is dangerous. So that's why I insist that we need to develop a media domain that upholds our narrative and educational system with a curriculum that serves our interests. And when it comes to symbols like greetings, pictures, objects of art, these are important expressions. Africa is very rich with those ones, and they have similarities across the continent. African people outside the continent. And when it comes to rituals like paying respect, elder celebrations, these usually involve music, songs, dance, sharing of foods that are distinctly African. And the musical instruments, in many cases, even the language, convey special meanings which express the uniqueness of the African identity. So the implications of all this is that even if African cultures are diverse, a close examination will reveal that great similarities as you move across the continent, regions appear. You see this in the art forms, in languages they speak, their foods, and a prominent area is the belief in the afterlife. All African cultures that I know believe that their ancestors die and go somewhere and often come to protect the living people, you know? And these kind of commonalities are good because we know that people share similar beliefs and way of life tend to agree on many things and tend to cooperate, okay, to achieve things of common interest. So this is really very good. But I think the challenge for us as African people is the language part, you know? A common language is key to effective communication and understanding, and two important factors in achieving peace and unity among any group of people. So my prayer is that one day Africans will be able to adopt a common African languages for official and daily use. After all, people who and speak in terms of other people's languages are effective to conquer people. So I would really like to conclude by saying that even if our culture is diverse, what we really need is a deeper understanding of our cultures across the continent by actively learning about them through books, songs, tourism, through forums such as this ones. And as we get to understand our cultures and observe their commonalities, we then begin to get a sense of our belongingness and oneness. We also need to begin to develop love, to learn a different African language other than ours to facilitate communication for the purposes of organization, mobilization, and business. I know this will require serious cultural transformation, but to be positive, this transformation must originate from within the African continent or from within the community of the African people in order to preserve the distinct African identity, which, by the way, is necessary for the survival of the African society. Thank you very much. I am because we
are. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Joseph from South Sudan. I am because you are. Thank you for that wonderful report. Up next, you're going to have our brother, Slide Folder from Guyana. Yes, Slide, can you?
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Thank you for having me this morning. My report is that we continue to stretch out our hands towards our brothers and sisters. As it is right now in Guyana, we are having threats by the Venezuelan who is trying to claim half of our country, the Essequibo Islands. And the Essequibo, we have an arbitration that was awarded to Guyana in 1988. And we are currently before the International Court of Justice with the Venezuelan for the establishment of our territory. However, the Venezuelans have been sending troops into our country via the interior, and they have been threatening Guyana's sovereignty. And so, like the many countries throughout the world who right now is engaged in wars and rumors of wars, Guyana too is being threatened because we are now a international player when it comes to oil and gas. And so the Venezuelans are now on our heels because we are the largest producer of oil in the Caribbean and in South America right now. Venezuela has a large amount of oil, but we know the situation in Venezuela is unstable with Maduro being their president and having their thing. So as Black people in this country, we have been challenged with the government who is not really making any headway to garner our safety, and we are still being chastised because our ancestors came here as slaves. And so we continue to fight discrimination and xenophobia. We continue to fight and to put our I Love Black People app. I am about sharing the I Love Black People app so that Black people here in Guyana can get a sense of pride and to know that we are working. We are working throughout the world to bring about that knowledge. And so I want to say thank you once again for having me, and thanks for supporting us here in Guyana. And I want to say I am because we are. Thank you.
Yes, I am because you are. Thank you very much, Clyde Four from Guyana. Up next, you're going to have our sister from Kenya, Christine Nekesa, sorry. Yes, Christine, can you hear us?
Yes, Yvonne, I can hear you very well.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Before I continue, I can see my brother Afikimbia is really sweating. I wonder where you are, because here in Kenya, it's winter. So, okay, let's continue. On the topic about the African cultures.
4, 5, 6.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. So on our report today, our first speaker from South Sudan did a very good job in giving the definitions. So I would like to say the African culture is very, very diverse. But on the same point, we are connected. In our diversity, somewhere we are connected in a way. So when we look at the African literature, I want to use an example here, if I'm allowed. I am Kenyan, and Kenyans, we are identified with marathon runners. So every time I hear the Kenyan national anthem, somewhere in London or maybe Berlin or anywhere across the world, there's that chord it strikes in me. So that's exactly what happens when we look at the African literature. That chord that the Kenyan national anthem strikes in me is exactly what our literature does to us as the Black people of Africa. Why? Because everything that we are taught comes from somewhere. We all believe that our ancestors lived at some point, they died, and before they died, they did 1, 2, 3 things for our good. So we love to identify with that. That at most times gives us a sense of direction, a sense of belonging, and everyone wants that. So wherever you are, provided you are within Africa, anytime you hear an African beat, an African story, an African drum, and you are on the streets of London, for example, it will always strike you like, that is ours. Because most of the time, these things are uniquely African. There's no way a drum will beat and you'll be like, is it from Europe? Or no, they are most of the time uniquely African, you'll be like, yes, that's from South Africa. Yes, that's from the West. Yeah, that's from the East. So it gives us that sense of, wow, that is home. Wow, those are my brothers. Wow, that is my sister across the street. So the African literature has that sense of bringing us together because we love to identify with our ancestors. Something else, when we look at the African literature, be it songs, be it art, be whatever it is, 99.9% of it is always written or narrated with a lesson. So you will find a story, for example, or a song at that. But at the end of this song, the listener, who is maybe a Black child of a now generation, is supposed to learn that we value honesty. We value, say, hard work. We value camaraderie. We are a people, a community. We don't live like in solitude. So those things are instilled in us. So when the songs are being composed, when the poems are written, when we always have that in mind, so that at the end of the day, we are always united. When that story is told, you'll be like, oh, so I'm supposed to look at my neighbor as my sister, as my brother. I'm supposed to look at that Black child across the street as the same way I look at myself. That is the beauty about our African literature. We encourage communism. We encourage being together. We always encourage the good virtues. And also on the other hand, apart from just encouraging the good virtues, the literature usually points out the vices in our societies. For example, we discourage things like dishonesty. We discourage things like greed. So you will find that those literatures, those musics, those poems, those arts that are created also try to discourage the vices in our community. So thank you so much, Yvonne. I am because we are. And thank you, Afikimbia. You're really, really sweating, and I love wherever it is you are. I am freezing cold. Bye.
Yes, thank you very much. That was our sister from Kenya. Thank you for sharing nice examples and help us to understand more how our culture is so related to us. And also, as our brother said, if you didn't download our app, I Love Black People Safe Places app, please do so. It's available on iOS and also for Android users. It's also available on Google Play. I'm going to share the link in the comment section. Then you'll be able to download it, and feel free to share your feedback. And also, we are live from Facebook. If you're joining us from Facebook and you really want to know more about us, you can just write in the comment section. Then we'll be able to answer you. So up next, we're going to have brother Afiki Mbia from Zimbabwe. Yes, Afiki, can you hear us?
Yes, Yvonne, I can hear you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, good afternoon, depending on where we are. My name is Africanists from Zimbabwe. Today, I am going to present on a topic, how literature, music, art, and other cultural expressions contribute to a sense of African identity and unity. So by showcasing the diverse or extensive cultural expressions of African artists, the movement has fostered a sense of comprehending and appreciating among African people. This has in turn assisted to promote a shared African identity and challenge the divisive legacy of colonialism. Well, unlike European and Western literature, African literature is an inclusive awareness that emphasizes an artistic use of words as a way to teach important truths and remind their community of what the ancestors went through during their time of existence. However, music highlights African values with the various traditions accompanied by a melody. Many events of importance are celebrated with music, whether it is marriage, a birth, or a ceremonial rite of passage. There are work songs that accompany digging, chopping, and harvesting. In some countries, music and traditional art are seen as essential components of national identity. These draw inspiration from the cultural roots to create works that reflect their unique perspectives and experiences. More so, cultural identity finds a voice through music by both its own community and others. Thus, music serves a bridge that connects individuals to their cultural heritage, consenting them to express their identity and share their stories. In the view of our art, well, many African cultures emphasize the importance of ancestors as intermediaries between the living, the gods, and the supreme creator. And art is seen as a mode through which we contact these spirits of ancestors. Art may also be used to depict gods and is valued for its functional purposes. It, art gives meaning to our lives and helps us understand our world. It is essential part of our culture because it permits us to have deeper understanding of our emotions. It also increases our self-awareness and also allows us to open to new ideas and experiences. Cultural arts such as music, art, drama, creative writing, photography, and dancing are tools that help develop the mind and body, refine feelings and thoughts, and reflect and represent our customs and values as a society. Cultural arts help to explain the world in which we live through an exploration of creativity. I am because we are. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Fikimbia. Thank you for that wonderful report. I am because we are. Yes, up next we are going to have a brother from Kenya, Bernard Oguta. Yes, Bernard, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself.
Yes, Yvonne, I can hear you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, from wherever you are.
Yes.
Movement. For me, I will be brief because, as usual, there's no such much time we can give a broad history of our topic today. I think. Can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, my fellow comrades have given the definitions of what literature is, music, art, and other forms of cultural practices which contribute to our unity and identity. So, for everyone, I can say such like things are like languages, sports, ethnicity, and kinship, intermarriages, religion, and running to gain knowledge. For example, one, I can say language identifies as we as Africans. For example, the Swahili language in Kenya is within the East African bloc, whereby most of our readers have influenced their learning institutions to practice the language, the Swahili language, which is mostly used within the East African community. sports as well. You can see we have the AFCON competitions across the African region, whether from the north to the south, we do these competitions. Here in East Africa, the leadership has influenced that we have East African, even if it's schools competitions, it has been extended across to the East African community, which indicates unity between us. As I've said, to kinship, we have the Maasais of Kenya and the Maasais of Buran of Ethiopia and Buran of Kenya, Somalis of Kenya, from the Somalia country who are our neighbors. So all these have come across and the intermarriages across the borders. So the borders are just imaginary drawn lines which separates us, but we are one. Coming to running oral education, I can testify that the certificates which we get across Africa, they are being recognized all over our region. So I can say running and knowledge exchange as unified us as Africans. Thank you. I am because we are.
Yes, thank you very much, Bernard Oguta. I am because we are. Thank you for the wonderful report. Up next, we are going to have our Nigerian brother, Yazid Idris Abubakar. Yes, Yazid, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
You're not edible enough.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, now we can hear you.
Okay. So, the role of African culture of Africans, most especially in Nigeria, we say northern Nigerian place.
No, we can't hear you. Maybe you can try and remove the earphones.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. The role of African writers in Africa in shaping or explaining to see cultures and civilizations who camaraderie in Africa is quite explainable in the northern Nigerian case. So I will use, are you with me? Okay, so I will use one of the songs of one famous African nationalist in Nigeria who used to train which Africans which Africans and northern Nigerians have participated to the best of their ability to express how northern Nigeria to see participated in nationalism and how African cultures and civilizations were prior to the coming of Europeans. So Saad Zungur has one famous songs which he termed as Africa Jamhuria ko Mulukiya, which is in English Africa, a republic or a monarchy. In that very song, he illustrates the way and manner in which Africans are living and the political leadership that existed prior to the coming of Europeans in such a way that there is honesty, respect of leadership, elderly respect and societal cohesion, as well as organizational structure of the northern Nigeria to see. Saad Zungur was quite exemplary in northern Nigerian nationalist activity. They participated duly in struggle for the independence of Nigeria. He was imprisoned in northern Nigeria by the native authority, as we have known it in northern Nigeria, which was run by colonial imperialists. He was imprisoned several times with his leader Malang Aminu Kano. So they participated. The importance of these songs is still being celebrated and is still being revisited for academic and so national cohesion activities. Whenever there is a forum whereby we in northern Nigeria wants to at least revive the culture of nationalism and social cohesion of Africa, and to remember ourselves that we have a sense of identity and a sense of culture that is quite different, and we want to revive our society from the ills of this new modernity and others. So we revert to his songs because he illustrates a sense of identity in our society, as to say predominantly a Muslim society. So honesty is a very much celebrated social behavior, and social relationship is very cordial. So Saad Zungur's songs is very vital in determining such kind of habits, respect to elders, respect to our cultures, the way we dress, the way we behave with our fellow society, the sense of camaraderie, the sense of belonging to our own society. So these songs continue to be a source of reference. There are so many songs that are participant. I don't know if time will allow me to delve into Abubakar Laden and Fela Kuti of the southern Nigeria, but there are so many songs in African literature. I don't know. I know I don't have time. I want to delve into that famous book that Christian, I don't know, one of our participants referenced it with, that is Things Fall Apart. I want to delve into Franz Fanon, Rage of the Earth, but I know I don't have time to. So how do I?
Yes, you can have 30 seconds and
so I know I don't have much time to delve into that writings. We have Team Amanda, which in our work in Defenders. So there are so many Nigerian literatures that portrayed how we as Africans, or to say, we behave and the way we operate our own sociological and sociocultural environments, quite different from the bastardized Western culture, which was forcibly inculcated in our mind by the Europeans. So this kind of literary works are very instrumental in shaping and reviving as well as imbibing the culture of sense of belonging and changing our way of conceptual understanding of our society. They are one of the most problematic things in our African society that we quite don't want to reach. That's our problem. That's the problem that in our African society, we are unable to still quite wash away. So I didn't mean we are reading much about our literary works. We will have at least abandoned so many bastardized Western cultures. Though these songs of African nationalists will have a very impact in our society. So I will stop here without wasting much of my time. I am because you are. Thank you for your time.
Yes, thank you very much, Yazid from Nigeria. Thank you for sharing your insight with us. I am because we are. Yes, up next, we're going to have a brother from Sierra Leone, Iya Alfred Komba.
Yes, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone.
Yes, good afternoon. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Ivan. As it stands, there has been various deliberation on the issues of culture, art, music. Well, unfortunately, the transformation we are having now in Africa, moving from our traditions, our cultures, and some of our practices, following the principle of the white supremacy, stopping some of our culture as them being considered to be illegal practice or against human rights by way of life. To me, it has been observed to be one of the deterrents of our value being sold. As if you read like one of our famous writer in Africa, Chinua Achebe, he wrote one book that said that a title, Things Fall Apart. And according to when you read the novel properly, they will tell you that things that fall apart are the traditions, our cultures, our belief practices that used to bring us together, establish the unity in Africa. And even kids, when we are growing up, there were times we play in an open place. You see children of those age, they will come together during the moonlight, they play together. But when culture came in, they will tell you stop XYZ as a result of abuse, human trafficking, and all this stuff. That has totally changed the culture, the practices, the beliefs. Sometimes we used to hear stories from our great grandfather, which passed on the kind of inheritance chain. How they will tell you in our days XYZ we are done to ensure we keep the culture in mind, the practices, the African knowledge, keep going, how we are coming up. But now you see that they will tell you about how Europe is, what are the practices of the white man, what are some of these things. In reality, it has taken up our mind from believing in the strength of Africa, from believing what Africans can do. We can remember a few years before independence in Sierra Leone, we have strong fighters who actually stood up to ensure that Sierra Leone had the independence. They referred the war in those days, quote unquote, as bomber war. They used sword. And these people were actually our warriors, like the Baibures. These are Samoritris. These are people who stood firm to ensure Sierra Leone gained independence. But at the end of the day, they did not enjoy it, but they stood in some points to ensure we had it done. So our practice now to ensure we use some of their skills, their traditional magic, which used to bring us together to admire. We have shows like called Cacao Show. In Sierra Leone, there is a show we refer to as Cacao Show. It's a cultural show that people bring harvest of the best. So bring their cows, the best cow in their farm. They'll bring the best cassava leaf. They'll bring the best cassava, even the tuber, to gathering where you see people come together. They celebrate yearly. But now some of these things is gradually reducing its value. Now you will not see brothers exchanging some of these things together. Why? We are all following on technology, yes, technology is important, it has its own positive impact. But for Africa, we are losing our culture completely, which is reducing the intimacy, that used to bring us together. Now we are no longer gathering, celebrating some of these things we used to admire in the past. Currently, we had some engagement. It was too funny to see Sierra Leone having a post-election concern, and we had external observer or diplomat coming to resolve those things. Because we lack the culture of believing or trusting ourselves, we cannot settle our dispute. These are some of the challenges we are facing altogether. I could recall vividly the past African Nations Cup, when Sierra Leone got qualification to partake in that Nation Cup after 20-something years. The whole country, I saw opposition, the key opposition, I saw the ruling party. We were all celebrating. So I think football also serves as one of those acts that is bringing us together as a nation. And as a nation, especially Africa, we actually need to consider our tradition as part of our beliefs and our culture that will actually bring us together as a. There was a magical show which again that was organized, I think in Nigeria, where they had traditional people from various who perform magic from different countries in Africa. They converge. We have by then Hassan Jallo that represented Sierra Leone. It was marvelous. You see beliefs, you see admiration, you see the love for us galvanizing together as a family. But now all these things are gone. So it is nice to at least us reflecting back, or we bring back forward, fast forward a flashback, those events that will bring unity and strength. Hence, Africa will be one. I am because we are. Thank you very much.
I am because we are. Thank you for sharing those insights with us. Time is not on our side. We are going to continue with the Pan-African healthcare class with Nana Akua.
Beta Sorority Incorporated. And I'm personally doing it in honor of a good sister friend of mine, Akiba Taylon Gatson, who passed away some years ago from breast cancer. And so I have decided to raise some funds and volunteer in walking in this Making Strides Against Breast Cancer walk that's here in Baltimore on October 21st. And so I've pre-recorded this, and still in keeping up with the schedule, we are talking about detoxification today. And so I don't know how to maneuver showing slides and recording this. So you'll just sort of follow along with me from previous handouts, or just take notes. But I'd like to just start off with all the ways that we toxify, right? Or intoxicate, toxify, yeah. Or intoxicate our bodies every day. So we know that we've spent most of the course discussing healthy ways to live, how to eat, what to eat, when to eat, how to avoid stress and other barriers to proper digestion and absorption of nutrients. We've talked specifically about what nutrition is, and macro and micronutrients. And so let's spend a little bit of time discussing what things do not provide nutrition to the body, and how it creates an environment where we have to cleanse and detox on a very regular basis. And so I want to start with just sharing, and as you know, I always have loads of handouts and different things that I like to share to increase our collective knowledge about our health, so that we can truly be available to fight against racism and xenophobia and Afrophobia and any and all other ills or social injustices of the world. We know that we first have to be in optimal shape, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and of course, physically. And so let's just discuss a few ways that we intoxicate the body. So we know that certain substances such as alcohol, certain foods, certain food additives, environmental toxins, pesticides that are, and herbicides that are found in foods, different food allergens. They're just some substances that will not agree with our constitution. Certain medications and drugs, whether pharmaceutical or street or recreational drugs. We know that all of these things can lead to toxicity. We also know that bacterial overgrowth, fungal overgrowth, parasites, different infections that exist in the body caused by these microorganisms or other substances based on our diets and lifestyles. We know that there are certain types of substances that are required in the body for proper digestion, and the absence of those things can also cause toxicity. We know that there are certain mindsets, mental thoughts, and processes that will lead to toxicity. We know that stress, I think we discussed in the last couple of classes, how stress impacts the body and how it can cause or worsen any number of physical health conditions or ailments. And so all of these are things that can intoxicate the body. And so we know that we have to be very mindful of what it is that we are introducing into our being. I want to spend a little time talking specifically about food colors and other additives that are found in a lot of foods. I often discuss how it's very sad that the standard American diet, especially, may contain more food additives, specifically food colors, that are harmful to the body than pretty much anywhere else in the world. I also am quite annoyed that you may even have healthier pet foods than you do some of these foods that we feed our babies and our children. And again, I'm really here focusing on food colorings. This is a really, really big issue for me as a parent. I have always been very careful about what foods I allow my children to eat. And it's become a very intentional quest to avoid food colors, among other things. But we know that we end up having crazy colored, toothpaste and candies and sweets and snacks and even other foods, even foods that we think would be healthy. There are different shakes and smoothies and drinks and things that have color added to them for no healthful reason at all, right? And so I have a particular issue about food colorings. And so I wanted to share about the risk of food additives. So we know that since the 1950s, mainstream food manufacturers have added a dizzying number of artificial colors, emulsifiers, flavors, preservatives, stabilizers, thickening agents to the American food supply, right? And I'm quoting from this Smart Consumer article from 1999, I think it is. Well, it actually references some sources from 97 and 99. But it talks about artificial colors being linked to behavioral and learning problems in children, artificial flavors being so widespread that most of us consume them on a daily basis. And they are suspected carcinogens, which cause allergic reactions, including gastrointestinal upset and respiratory and skin problems. And the largest class of food colorings, coal tar dyes, are well documented as cancer-causing agents. So we have to be very aware of color agents or color that we find on labels. The Brilliant Blue or Blue Number 1, this is a coal tar dye, is used in alcohol, cordials and liqueurs, is used in breads, caviar, skim milk, prepared fish, all sorts of things. And we know that this promotes breast and kidney tumors in lab animals, and for that reason it's widely banned in Europe. We know that sunset yellow or yellow number 6, which is found in candies and soft drinks, this causes adrenal and kidney problems, allergic reactions, and chromosome damage. Tartrazine or yellow number 5 is another synthetic coal tar dye linked to allergic reactions in humans, such as asthma, runny nose, and hives. and can be life-threatening to individuals sensitive to aspirin. Certain food additives like aspartame, these are found in your diet, soft drinks, instant desserts, gum, candy, things like that. This is linked to blurred vision, depression, headaches, insomnia, nausea, rashes, tinnitus, and even seizures. Benzoic acid, this is found in beer, barbecue sauce, fruit juice, margarine, pickles, soft drinks. This can lead to asthma attacks, hives, hyperactivity, and irritation of the eyes and mucous membranes. BHA and BHT, this is used in baking or baked goods, breakfast cereals, candy, shortening. These have been implicated in behavioral problems, immune system disorders, kidney and liver damage, and sterility. We know that another unnatural color is Allura red or red number 40. This is found in breads, butters, ice cream, milk, jam, jellies, smoked fish. This was developed to replace the artificial dye that was banned in 1970, but this also has the artificial color that causes cancer in mice. And so there are a couple of others that's listed here, but my goal today is just to share, one, read labels, and two, if you see any of these that I've listed here in a food that you're considering, please reconsider. This would be the time that you would go to a health food store and pay an extra few cents or a couple of dollars for a natural healthier version of it. We know that sometimes because of our financial situations, we can't exclusively shop at our quote unquote health food stores, but we can pick and choose what foods. And this is something I've done for years. I've decided where I'll go for different food items. So I may very well go to, say, a mainstream chain grocery store for certain items, especially, I don't know, produce, because most of these stores now will have an organic option and a conventional option, right? And so we know also the numbers of the little stickers that are on our produce. Usually it's a 9. If I'm remembering correctly, if it's organic, if it's a 4, it's conventionally grown. And usually there's a 3, which usually you'll find on your citrus fruit, your oranges and things like that. This is also not your ideal situation because it's either unregulated or we know that it's not for sure organic and not going to be your best or most healthy option for your produce. But for some things like that, you can get in other stores. But by and large, things like pickles or relish and things, sauces like the barbecue sauce, things that I mentioned that's on this list, it'll be harder to find foods that do not contain these colors and these additives in your regular mainstream grocery stores, and you would have to seek out a health food grocery store, or and this could be a smaller local health food store or one of the larger chain health food stores. I'm purposely not mentioning them because I don't own any stock in any of them, and they, it's not the business that pays me. But we know whatever local or chain health food stores or natural food markets that we can go to, because they will likely have crackers that don't have high fructose corn syrup, right? Or they'll have relish that doesn't have yellow number 5 or yellow number 6 in it. It will have even meats that don't have added nitrates and colors added to the meats. Same with the seafood. They'll have those seafood items that will not have your added food colors to make them look fresher. Even though we know they don't naturally, salmon doesn't naturally look that vibrant of a pink color, right? And so on and so forth. Even, your beef and that sort of stuff, that they've added colors and nitrates and other preservatives and additives that are just not healthy. So you may choose, okay, these sets of foods I will get from, a health food market. And there may be some other things and maybe other things that you are conscious that are not the healthiest, but you're going to eat them anyway, well, sure, go ahead and get those from your regular store. But of the certain things, same thing with chips or prepackaged goods, you're going to get a better option at a health food market than some of these. If you are looking for sugar alternatives, you're going to get more options of sweets or candies and treats that are natural, that will not have your aspartame that was on this list that we just mentioned, for example, and it will be sweetened with xylitol or stevia or agave or monk fruit, or, you know, it's going to have healthier, more natural sweeteners as opposed to the aspartame and sucralose and some of these other artificial sweeteners that you'll find. If you're looking for sodas, you still choose to drink soda. Getting a brand that is a natural brand, it's still going to have carbonation in it, right? And we know that that's not ideal. We know that we don't want to introduce carbon into the body, right? But if you are making a conscious decision to still do a carbonated drink, health food option is going to be better because it's not going to have the caramel color. It's not going to have the high fructose corn syrup in it and some of the other additives. I think we even mentioned, the BVO, I don't know if I even mentioned the BVO, brominated vegetable oil is found in sodas, the aspartame, some of these other things that we know are in sodas. It's going to be void of those. It'll still be carbonated, right? But at least you're not getting your artificial colors and artificial sugars and sweeteners in it. And so make a conscious decision as to where you're getting your foods from, and build on that as you develop healthier habits. Another thing I'd like to point out is if you are choosing between certain types of foods. So for example, this list is sort of a basic nutritional guide. So it gives you the foods in a certain category that you should avoid and the foods that you should include or are considered acceptable. For example, if you're talking about beans, you would want to avoid, say, your canned pork and beans or your canned beans that is going to have a lot of salt and preservatives in it. You're going to go more so with beans that are not cooked with meat or animal fat. Fresh, beans, the dried beans that you prepare, soak, and then prepare yourself is always going to be a better option. If you're talking about beverages, we want to avoid our alcoholic beverages, coffee, pasteurized or sweetened juices, sodas, things of that nature. And you want to include more herbal teas, fresh vegetables, or fresh fruit juices. You're going to want to do more of a distilled water, even coffee substitutes that are made from like roasted grains, like roasted dandelion or chicory, things of that nature. What's popular these days is the various mushroom coffee drinks that provide a lot of nutrients that kind of gives you a good replacer for coffee. So there are many natural coffee alternatives, I think, on the market at this point. Your herbal teas. I'm not a tea drinker, but I always recommend for people who are tea drinkers is to choose teas that really may have some healthful benefit to you. So instead of your Lipton white or black tea, include green tea or include different herbal teas based on what issues you may have. And even if you don't have issues, choose some of those that would be considered super herbs that have a lot of nutrients in them that will just be healthy for you. This would be herbs like alfalfa, red raspberry, catnip, nettle. There's so many there, I'm drawing a blank. Dandelion, some of the immune boosting herbal teas like your elderberry, echinacea. So there are so many that you can include and use that as your after dinner tea or your morning cup of tea. But choosing better beverage options is going to be on this list. Dairy products, avoiding all soft cheeses, all pasteurized or artificially colored cheeses. A lot of cheeses are colored, a lot of coloring added to dairy products. And instead, what's more acceptable is raw goat cheese, non-fat cottage cheese, kefir, unsweetened yogurt, goat's milk, raw or skim milk, buttermilk, rice milk. And they have on this list soy dairy products. I would even more so, because of so much genetically manufactured soybeans, unless it's non-GMO, I would avoid soy products. But you have so many options. You have oat and hemp and almond, and probably some I'm not even thinking of. I used to always prefer rice milk. I love the taste. But as a thick girl, the rice milk has more calories than, say, the almond milk. But there are so many really tasty alternatives to dairy. So I really encourage you to try those options. And and of course there's a process, to it. But if you just can't do without cheese or yogurt or milk, trying a non-dairy option is going to be better for you in the long run. If we are talking about eggs, even choosing a boiled or a poached egg over a fried egg, for example, is going to be better. If we're talking about fish, we know that it's better to include freshwater whitefish or salmon, and we want to boil it or bake it instead of, say, your shellfish and fried fishes, herring, canned fishes, canned in oils and things like that. I guess this would be your anchovy, your herring, your sardines, even your tuna. If you're doing tuna, it's going to be a better option for it to be in those packs, water packed, so not cans, right? So a canned tuna is not going to be your best choice if you eat tuna, right? You're going to want those that are packed in those packs you kind of open up rather than in the cans. And as a general rule, anything that's in a can is going to be less optimal. So whether we're talking vegetables, if we can't get fresh vegetables, we know that frozen is a better alternative to canned. And of course, fresh is optimal. But if we can avoid canned fruits, vegetables, and foods like that, or meats like your tunas and things like that, avoiding the cans is going to be a better option for you. Oils is a big one. We know that we want to avoid all saturated fats, hydrogenated oils. We want to avoid margarine altogether. It says hydrogenated margarine, but all margarine is going to be hydrogenated and highly processed and made up. I'm sure they maybe have natural margarine, but really you're going to do better with getting some kind of plant-based butter as opposed to our typical margarine. We want to avoid hardened oils, shortenings, things of that nature. I was so surprised to find in Target, for those of you that are on this side of the world, Target is a big chain store that sells lard. Now I'm a country girl, so of course I know what lard is. And of course, growing up, in the South or in a rural area, lard was a common thing. I was just quite surprised that they now sell it in a store like that. We want to avoid all of those types of things. And instead, we want cold pressed oils, whether it's safflower or sunflower or olive or walnut. These are better. Coconut, sesame, avocado oils, these are all better oils. And if you are frying, we know that we have to use oils that have a high flash point value, meaning that they can be heated up to 400 degrees and maintain their molecular structure, and it doesn't break down and turn black, right? So if you're having a fish fry and after you fried a few pieces of fish, the oil is black, these are not the oils that you want to fry with. These are oils that do not withstand high temperatures. So high temperature frying or cooking is going to be better with macadamia nut oil, coconut oil, sesame oil, grapeseed oil. Lately, they made avocado oil one of those. I guess back 20 years ago when I was first learning this stuff, avocado oil wasn't maybe as prevalent, but definitely coconut oil, you're always going to win with grapeseed. These for years have been known and used for frying. These are going to be your better high temperature oils. In terms of seasoning, white and black pepper is hard on the digestive system. These are not going to be your best options. You really want to use for your seasonings. We want to read the labels. We don't want anything that has monosodium glutamate in it or MSG. This is a flavor enhancer, but it's a food additive that is known or linked to causing cancer. So we don't want to have any seasonings that have MSG in it. And we want to really just use garlic, onions, cayenne, actual dried herbs, whether it's rosemary or thyme or marjoram or basil. We really want to use those types of things. If you're looking for a fishy or mineral rich seasoning that you may use in your seafood or things like that, dulse and seaweed, things of that are going to be good options. Your liquid aminos or your coconut aminos, miso, apple cider vinegar, these are all good options for seasoning your food. Same thing with soups. If you can commit some time to putting some vegetables and whatever, beans, whatever you're planning on cooking in the crock pot or cooking them yourself, is going to be your very absolute best option as opposed to canned soups. They're going to be full of this MSG that I just mentioned, fat stock, salt, and other preservatives. These are not your best options. We talked about vegetables, sweets. I think I talked about that. You really want natural sweeteners. Raw honey is not my favorite. I think it has a little higher of a glycemic index than necessary, but as opposed to white sucrose or table sugar, that's definitely a better option. Agave nectar, I think, is a good option. And I mentioned already, like monk fruit and stevia and xylitol and these types of things. These are going to be better options than some of the other sweeteners that I've already spent some time talking about.
Yes, that was the recording that Anakua made for us since she was attending that breast cancer conference that she was talking about. Yes, but next week she will be live here on Zoom. If you have any question, just prepare it, then she'll be able to answer it. We are going to continue with the Pan-African history class with Dr. Tyrone Wright. Yes, Dr. Wright, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Pan-African History and Organizing course. I am actually going to do something. Well, I'm going to move right along. The week before, I did what I hadn't done before, which was address Malcolm X. In all of our sessions prior to the last two, I never did, covered Malcolm X, his Pan-African roots, his political position in terms of the African world and African liberation struggles and connecting African people on the continent to the struggle in the diaspora. And then last week I gave you the week before I gave you the Malcolm Marcus Garvey and, the Marcus Garvey connection. So I want to continue. Yvonne, I guess we need to talk offline because I want to find out. I'm not sure what week we're in, but I was asked to do a couple of original. Okay. Thank you. Okay. I saw that. lectures that I had not done before, right? So that also was what I was trying to do. I was trying to fill in gaps that I had had over the last 3 years since we've been doing this, and address someone we had never addressed before in the context of the course. So I'm going to continue with that. So I want to get back on track, but I'm going to address the other proponent, which, since we're in week 7, I obviously have not done, which is Du Bois. And it is essential for us to get back on the conversation in terms of the continent of Africa. I'm going to address Du Bois and how he facilitates the Pan-African struggle on the continent in terms of organization. So what I'm going to share is, let me see. Do I have it on here? I think so. I'm going to share a document this time around, but what I'm going to share is the resolutions from the 1st and the 5th Pan-African Congress, because I always want to make sure that every cycle has that. That gives us an organizational outlook in terms of what organized bodies that we would see as Pan-Africanists were demanding, okay, and what they were fighting for. So I will be sharing that in the course of this session. I hate these glasses. These are readers that I had to just put on because my own glasses are not at my disposal. However, so it's going to be a little difficult because these are not like the norm in terms of vision. Okay, so Du Bois, your last reading that I shared during the session, Booker T. Washington, Pan-Africanism and Pan-Africanists, actually addresses Du Bois. So I will start from there. Everyone knows W.E.B. Du Bois, and the reason why I'm going to start from there is because it's a quick way for me to get an image of him for you included in the text, because I have a picture there of a very young Du Bois, and it helps. Let me see. Let me open this. Okay. So I'm going to start with this chapter that we covered last week, that you were given, Booker T. Washington, Pan-Africanism, Pan-Africanists. I want to see, just for the purpose of this, who actually read that? Who actually read the chapter that I shared, Booker T. Washington, Pan-Africanism and Pan-Africanist? Let me see in the chat. Did anybody actually read it? I seldom do this, but did anybody actually read it? No one read it? Nobody read it? Okay. All right. So please still read it. It's in the Telegram. Yvonne, are people accessing Telegram? Because that's where I was told to place the readings.
Not all of them.
Okay. So if you haven't read it, okay, so it's a perfect reason for me to go back there and begin with Du Bois at that point, because it's unread. So please do read it, because it gives you a very intentional overview of how Pan-Africanism comes to be, and what the vision and mission was for Pan-Africanism at the turn of the century. The turn of the 20th century, 1900. So please do that. I'm going to share it here to address Du Bois, but so it is and it is a perfect starting point since people haven't read it. Okay, so I'm going to share the document. And hold on, let me share. Okay, there we go. Screen. Yes, I'm on my device, even though I have my phone right here. I mean, listen, guys, I just prefer it like this. I don't know why I've been doing it like this so long. It takes so much energy on my computer. Well, I guess it doesn't take a lot of energy on my computer, but it is what it is. So I feel like I have more ability to, work everything here on the phone, and I can move around. So right here, you see the title, right? And I addressed some of this last week, right? This is a chapter from a book, and I don't have a book on hand, a book that I actually wrote, but it is a chapter on the history of Pan-Africanism, and certainly Washington is in it because the book is about his role in Africa. But more importantly, what I intentionally did here was to give a history of sorts throughout the Pan-African world that is on page 16, I believe. Yeah, page 16. It talks about how, Pan-Africanism constitutes itself at this moment in time. Most of you know, or should know at least, that the historic conference of 1900, so we're only in week 7, so that means that you all I have not covered this with you all, but except for, what I shared last week. But the history of Pan-Africanism is very interesting because you have not just one individual as part of the African Association, Henry Sylvester Williams, buzzing about this and coining the phrase, but you have people all over the African diaspora around the world to a large extent, particularly in the diaspora, who are on the same page at this moment in time, who understand the need for unity. And it is out of this chapter and this particular history that I elevate the definition of Pan-Africanism as the purpose, unification of African people for the purpose of eradicating oppression and exploitation. Now, where do I get that from? I get that from the first Pan-African Conference. That ultimately is the working definition that they assert. Okay. And so this chapter, I would encourage you to read the entire chapter. And it's interesting. It's not painful to read it from what I've been told. Right? It's not painful to read because it does give you every step of the way, it gives you information that is off the beaten path, but still essential. The kind of information that you would ask, like, why don't I know this? Why haven't I been given this in another context, in another time of place, really? Because it is so essential to understanding what the Pan-African struggle really is about, okay? As opposed to, people's contemporary online utterances of what Pan-Africanism is. But I'll read here. It says, prior to the first Pan-African Conference, 19th and early 20th century Pan-Africanism in the U.S. was espoused and practiced by individuals like Bishop Henry McNeill Turner, of which I should do a presentation on, Martin Delaney, likewise, Edward Blyden, Henry Highland Garnett, and Alexander Crummell. These are important because these are 19th century Pan-Africanists. It wasn't enough for them to assert in the United States and the Caribbean the need for unification as protection. And that's what Pan-Africanism is. But they also had connections you know, to the African continent. Okay. Bishop Henry McNeill Turner, you know, on the continent. Edward Blyden on the continent, Liberia, so on and so forth. Many of them had direct ties to the continent of Africa in some real way, right? Real physical way. But as early as 1829, David Walker's appeal reflected on the history of African civilizations and made a connection between those in Africa and Africans scattered abroad. His appeal not only aimed to challenge the institution of slavery, but to educate the masses on African history and culture. Pan-Africanists amongst the African population in the Caribbean included the initiator of the first Pan-African Conference, Henry Sylvester Williams of Trinidad, Garvey's mentor, J. Robert Love, and Dr. J. Albert Thorne from Barbados. So this is giving you an understanding that how Pan-Africanism emerges is overwhelmingly as a result of people passing on the tradition, right? You see Garvey, J. Robert Love is his mentor, but he gets the other part of his Pan-Africanist philosophy in terms of a method to share with the African world from none other than Booker T. Washington. Whether one likes that or not, you know, that is the factual history as stated even by Garvey, right? So this is telling you, you should get the feeling that there's a tradition being cultivated here that existed even before the first Pan-African Conference, right? That all of these people are sensing the same thing. And all over the African world, and what I mean by African world, it means everywhere African people are, okay? That's what it means to me. That is how I'm defining, how I'm using that term or that phrase. All over the African world, you can see people are coming together. It reminds me of something that Kwame Ture said. He says, blood is thicker than water. He said, blood is thicker than water. Everywhere we are coming together. In other words, we have oceans dividing us, right? It's particularly those out here in the diaspora. The ocean divides us from Africa. But everywhere we are coming together. Why? Because we are blood, right? And it's thicker than this water that's between us. That gives me chills because that's like, you know, the way he says it. Maybe I should find a clip where he's saying that and share it with you. But this is indicative of it because you see in the Caribbean, in the United States. So this group of men, Bishop Henry McNeill Turner, Martin Delaney, Edward Blyden, Henry Highland Garnett, and Alexander Crummell. You may not even know some of these people, but they are already beating the drum for unity of African people to address our condition, to work in unison long before the turn of the century. And then 1829, David Walker's appeal reflected on the history of African civilization, right? And made a connection between those in Africa and Africans scattered abroad. And then, of course, Pan-Africanists amongst the African population in the Caribbean included the initiator of the first Pan-African Conference, Henry Sylvester Williams of Trinidad, Marcus Garvey's mentor, J. Robert Love, and Dr. Albert Thorne from Barbados. But decades prior to their emergence, the Haitian Revolution, of course, occurred and bolstered Pan-African consciousness in the diaspora as well. Haiti would produce Benito Sylvain and Antonin Foreman, both who met Booker T. Washington in 1897 and attended the first Pan-African Conference in 1900. Out of Haiti came a wing of Pan-Africanists who created literary discourse on diasporic philosophies on Africa. The African population in Haiti produced Jean Prince Mars and Louis Joseph, who repeatedly explained that Haiti was the embodiment of the irresistible force of a united Africa. Pan-Africanism had a dialectical characteristic to it, which allowed historic events like the Haitian Revolution to produce a response and rise in consciousness amongst African people internationally. Similarly, in 1896, the Ethiopian victory over Italian imperialist forces in the Battle of Ottawa also bolstered the connection between diasporic Africans and those on the continent. Let me go right back though. One notable event that is not in this chapter, but is in the revised version of this book, is that, 1739, even prior to the Haitian Revolution, in South Carolina, in Low Country here in the United States, you had what? You had the Stono Rebellion. You had the Stono Rebellion that took place. And this is, some say, a precursor to, some of the events in the Caribbean. And it was indicative of so many African people from the same region in Africa, Angola specifically, being in proximity to each other and being able to communicate. And where they could not communicate, there was the use of the drum. This is an acknowledgement that we were ethnically different, but familiar with each other and understood we had a common cause, right? Definitively Pan-Africanism, they began an insurrection and march. They are marching to Florida, to a free African settlement, held by the Spaniards, unfortunately, but a free African settlement nonetheless. And they travel through the Low Country of South Carolina, down into Georgia with the intention to make it to Florida and using the drum. So one of the large and early insurrections in the United States, and that was multi-ethnic, right? Was a multitude of African people who were ethnically different and knew that, okay, but also seized the moment in terms of familiarity with each other because of the drum. Well, let me say that again. Had familiarity with each other because they are regionally familiar on the continent of Africa. That being said, where language failed, the drum was used, okay? And this is how they called each other to the insurrection and march towards Florida, okay? And it was a major event in the continental US, and that was 1739. So over and again, you have us coming together to protect ourselves and to fight off the cloak of oppression and exploitation going, very far back. So this is in fact a tradition, but I do the roll call perhaps to give you a sense of what that moment in time, like 1900, as this culminates in the first Pan-African Conference, okay? I'm recreating that energy. It's like if we were to talk about, 20 years from now, what it was like to live through a pandemic and what the social consciousness was like that produced, the protests in 2020 and around George Floyd's murder, and the social and political climate that emerged from that going forward. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not putting a whole lot on that because, that it will soon be erased, unfortunately. Our struggle is going to be continuous, as it has always been. The Black freedom struggle, the African struggle for independence and freedom has always existed above and below ground. So it's never not going to be here. It'll be here. We will be engaging in struggle until we get the freedom and the respect for our humanity that we require. That being said, this movement in 2020 it was a certain set of conditions that brought it about, right? So just in the way, if you were to speak about 2020, 20 years from now, you would have to tell people what was going on with us, what was happening, this happened, that happened, right? So that inspired organization and movement amongst the people. So this is what I'm attempting to do, give you sort of a roll call and give you some historical context about who was contributing and what they actually did. This allows me to get into, the proponents that are discussed in this chapter. But of course, I'm going to give you this, and then we're going to also take off to look at an individual proponent, which we're going to do essential. Du Bois, he is essential, good, bad, or indifferent, and so the social climate and consciousness of the African diaspora in the Western Hemisphere and throughout the world produced two of the most prolific Pan-Africanists, W.E.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey. Each of these men had important relationships and exchanges with Booker T. Washington. Marcus Garvey's relationship with Washington would open the door both literally and figuratively to the first mass organization of the African world through the Universal Negro Improvement Association, UNIA. However, Washington's relationship with Du Bois would be inconsequential to the progress of Pan-Africanism. The relationship between Washington and the apparent accommodationist and Du Bois, the Pan-Africanist scholar activist, has shaped African-American social and political history in the U.S. for at least a century. Booker T. Washington, W.B. Du Bois, and Marcus Garvey would all function differently as Pan-Africanists. The methods they employed vary, but like previous Pan-Africanists, they all had one singular objective beyond unity, which was to advance the plight of African people in the face of oppression. Okay, so I go on to discuss Du Bois, but I just want to, I don't think there's anyone on here who doesn't know what Du Bois looks like. But if you don't, hey, let me just take it back, because at the end of the chapter, there's some images. So there's Du Bois, right? And I think that I give you, I thought that I gave an image of Henry Sylvester Williams. I think I cut it off because it doesn't go to the next page. It stops there at page 33. So there is another image of Henry Sylvester Williams in that chapter. But there is none other than W.E.B. Du Bois, or Du Bois, as some people call him. And he is the young scholar intellectual born during the period of radical Reconstruction, which I think in so many ways is why he could never let it go, meaning in the United States, post the Civil War, there are Reconstruction amendments that are asserted, and they are the 13th Amendment, which essentially ends slavery, but the 14th and the 15th Amendment, which most importantly would, the 14th Amendment would allow for naturalization. Anyone born on U.S. soil would be considered American, an American citizen. And then the 15th gave the right to vote. The 14th Amendment now, you probably associate it with immigration to the United States, but it comes out of the Black freedom struggle. Okay, the mechanism, the legal mechanism, and the legislative mechanism that is the 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendment comes specifically out of the Black or the African freedom struggle. in the United States. And it is still invoked, which allows for people to immigrate to the United States and their children, once becoming U.S. citizens, benefiting from that equal protection under the law, also 14th Amendment. But it is the legislative lever that allows anyone who is born in the United States, so the parent can be from anywhere, born in the United States, can have U.S. citizenship. And yes, there are theoretically freedoms and protections that come with that. Hence, in the United States, we are still in the grips of that struggle. But the 15th Amendment then goes on to give the right to vote to the same group of people. And Du Bois is born in 1868, when these amendments to the Constitution are actually ratified. And his whole life is a commentary on trying to force the US government to honor these amendments, these Reconstruction amendments that he felt were written in the blood of those who fought in the Civil War, particularly our African ancestors who fought in the Civil War for our freedom and liberation. And the United States government, as far as he was concerned, was obligated to enforce the Constitution and enforce the amendments to the Constitution that gave any African and Black person in the United States all the freedoms that anyone else would have, and all the protections that anyone else would have under the US Constitution. Let me say it another way. In the United States in particular, no white person has to get amendments except for women. They got 19th Amendment to the Constitution, which allows women to vote. But aside from that, they don't need amendments and acts to give them their constitutional rights. Okay? They just invoke the Constitution, which is a document that is supposed to afford you rights and protect those rights, as well as your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness here in that context. However, for the African person, for the Black person in the United States, those rights and freedoms and protections have not been provided until the 14th Amendment. And then even then, the 14th Amendment is not appropriately applied and enforced, so as to still deny the African population in the United States equal protection under the law and limited freedom in every area of life. Okay, so Du Bois spends a great deal of his life waging this struggle, which is why he is appropriately disenchanted on the eve of the March on Washington and in wake of the Voting Rights Acts, both 1964 and 1965. Why? Because he is saying the 14th and the 15th Amendments were, the kit and caboodle, meaning they were everything. Enforce it. We don't need to get an act to tell white people in America not to violate our constitutional rights and our right to vote. The 14th and the 15th Amendment does that. And so in many ways, you can feel for Du Bois, because he would live almost 100 years and become so disenchanted with the Black freedom struggle. Let me just also make another point about him, and then I'll get into the Pan-African side of this, because he lives a very long time, so he's able to have all the experiences that life can afford one to have. But this is the man who created the art of protest. I think people do not understand, even right now with this whole, Palestinian Israeli conflict, the world does not appropriately understand and give credit to the fact that the art of protest comes out of the Black freedom struggle. Okay, absolutely. Comes out of the Black freedom struggle. And Du Bois is that scholar activist that created the art of protest in the form of direct, nonviolent protest, people coming out in mass, pressuring the powers that be in an organized and strategic way. That's Du Bois. We don't have that anywhere in really world history. Okay. And no, we're not going to go there and talk about Gandhi and all of that. Like, no. In our own Black freedom struggle, we have created the art of protest. When you see what the strategies and tactics are for people on the ground right at this moment, that comes out of the Black freedom struggle, and yes, people should know it, right? Because it has defined deliberate struggle around the world. It has been the playbook for conscious and deliberate direct action around the world. Okay. So Du Bois is that person, but he also has another side. He also engages in, socialism, which to me is not problematic. He also has a Pan-African context, which I address here. So it's important, if you're a part of this, to actually read this, because it gives you some essential information without belaboring the point so much. But I'm just going to read a little bit of it to you in the conclusion. Let me see. Do I want to read in the conclusion? Yeah, I want to read in conclusion because I don't want to get into the Du Bois Washington piece unless you all want me to. Write in the chat if you want me to address Du Bois Washington. But this is about Pan-Africanism. So I stay on that point and message, not so much about interpersonal conflicts or the idea or myth of interpersonal conflicts between proponents of Pan-Africanism. But hold on one second. Sorry, I'm pressing something on my computer. But so I'm just going to give you a little bit here in the conclusion of the chapter where Du Bois is addressed, because it's important to hold on. It's important that, okay, here we go. It's important to understand Du Bois' role, because if you just know his American context, you might never figure out the fact that he is the sole survivor of the first Pan-African Conference in 1900, right? He's a young man. 1894, he graduates from Harvard with the first PhD earned by a Black person in the history program there. You may never figure out that he is the person that creates the think tank that would eventually be the setting for African leadership, heads of states, to come together on the continent of Africa and strategize around a unified Africa and the inevitable, which is a liberated Africa. If you don't know, don't hear or see or learn about this little caveat of who he is, you may never get that understanding that this is the same person who had a very American context to a degree, but never forgot Africa and made a major contribution. I would say he had his own contradictions, But he also made a timeless contribution to Pan-Africanism and the African world, right? So the first Pan-African Conference created a buzz, and W.B. Du Bois, who declared the problem of the 20th century would be the color line, emerged as a leader with the creation and establishment of the Pan-African Congresses that followed. So he is the sole survivor. 1900, there's a first Pan-African Conference. All of the people who attend the first Pan-African Conference are dead by 1919. And he is the person, along with one other, or a few others, who initiate the Pan-African Congresses. And that is what I'm saying becomes eventually the think tank, because it's in that setting that the Organization of African Unity is born. And out of the Organization of African Unity, later on, the African Union is born. Now, we can debate and we will discuss whether or not the the African Union has fulfilled or betrayed the original vision and mission of the Pan-African Congresses and the Organization of African Unity. And last week, you remember, I talked about Malcolm and Malcolm creating the Organization of African American Unity, which was a play on the Organization of African Unity, right, on the continent, that is born out of the Pan-African Congresses. The OAU, Organization of African Union, also led by Nkrumah. Du Bois would end up spending the final moments of his life in Ghana with Nkrumah. So very significant. That being said, Du Bois is the sole survivor of the conference, right? Conference 1900, Congresses 1919, okay? Only one conference, numerous congresses and continuous congresses. So 1919, this is reinitiated, and the most significant of the historic congresses are the 5th and the 1st of the congresses. So eventually these congresses set the stage for the discourse around African liberation on the continent. The 5th Pan-African Congress, held in Manchester, was the most significant. African leadership vowed to push for the complete and total independence of Africa from colonial domination. Du Bois' leadership of the Congresses would be one of his greatest contributions to Pan-Africanism, which is my point today, right? He made a major contribution over the course of his life, but it's still very early in his life that this sets underway. And it's ironic how he goes through many changes only to come full circle, find himself on the continent of Africa. Nkrumah is like, come on home to Africa, because he has been beaten up in every way, mentally, emotionally, in the American continent, and Nkrumah gives him a place to be at that stage in his life, and he gives up everything. Notable point that a lot of people don't know about Du Bois did not just expatriate or relocate to Africa. He gave up his U.S. citizenship, and he became a Ghanaian national, evidently, under Nkrumah. Later on, after he dies, his wife, who gave up her citizenship along with him, would petition again for her U.S. citizenship, because she would return, I imagine, to the United States. That being said, that is so indicative of a place he made for himself so early in life. In other words, he is a champion of Pan-Africanism early on with the Congresses, creating the think tank that would be a place for an Nkrumah to have leadership, right? Du Bois is certainly much older than Nkrumah, and he is a visionary, even though, you know, there are moments in time where he does not have the complete formula. But he is the visionary that said, let's have the continuous Congresses along with others. I'm going to share a picture with you all of the Congresses and the original members that were there at the first Pan-African Congress, along with the document that would give you the resolutions from the first and the fifth Pan-African Congresses. Okay, so I just want to so we'll go back to this picture. I just want to end on that with Du Bois. I'm over time as usual. I'm supposed to be, it's like 11:45, supposed to be 30 minutes. I always go over. That being said, I want to end with the image. This is a picture of a very young Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. Initially a family friend and mentee of Washington, because this comes from Booker T. Washington, Africa, the making of Pan-Africanists, right? So mentee of Washington, later Du Bois became Washington's chief critic. He founded the Niagara Movement and the NAACP, a proponent of Pan-Africanism and direct protest who pushed for social and political rights in the U.S. So, you know, just to give you, for those of you who haven't seen him, just give you context, you know. And don't get me wrong, there's great criticism to level at Du Bois because he is the initiator of so many things, you know, to the degree that sometimes in the moments in his life where he is not on the right path per se, he creates entities and organizations that would exacerbate contradictions within the Black community, you know. So for instance, organizations that promote elitism and this whole concept of the talented 10. And we can qualify that thinking today. We know that the talented 10, whether in the United States or on the continent of Africa, has essentially betrayed the people. So, you know, when he is not at his best, he produced institutions or entities that would, in my opinion, do a disservice to us. But when he is in the higher and more progressive aspects of his consciousness, when he is in that state, he produces things and entities that are timeless. Now, it doesn't mean that they're perfect, but they are timeless and they actually bear some benefit for us collectively. You understand? So I think it's significant that he is born right out of enslavement. You know, he is not a slave. He is not born in the South. He does not have that experience and knows nothing of it. However, he lived in a country that had just put the institution of slavery to rest just less than 5 years before he is born. And it is still under the cloud of that, that these amendments to the Constitution are proposed and passed, and he is a child of that period, that era, that moment, right? So, but he goes on to have an impact on the African continent and the consciousness of African leadership on the continent. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it there because I went in overtime. Any questions, problems, comments about Du Bois and anything like this? I'm going to, let me see. Do I click done? Okay, I can click done. I think I can start this stream. Let me see. Uh-oh. Okay. All right. I got confused for a second. I was like, wait a minute. I thought I lost you all. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, so he makes that major contribution. Any questions, comments, problems, issues that you want to? There are roads named Du Bois and CBD and Marcus Garvey and I wrote, okay, wonderful. Yeah, nice presentation. Thank you. Hey, Dr. Wright, good to see you. Good to see you too. Oh, hi. Uh-huh. Okay. So let me just tell you guys, I'm not on WhatsApp a lot outside of teaching this course, but I will check it because you told me to. All right. Just join Telegram group. Okay, great. Yeah, and I'm going to post a couple other things in the Telegram group because I don't know if I posted the films as I wanted to. I should have, but last week I was, on the road traveling, and I may have not posted it, but I see that I posted the article, with the chapter as intended. Okay, so I don't want to keep you all too long, and I have a hectic day too today. So I am because we are. Thank you so much for staying to the end. Please read the chapter so that we could come back and have an informed conversation. We're like doing it a little bit less structured now. I was asked to do lectures that I hadn't done before in this context. I've done before, but not in this context. So I'm trying to do that, but Du Bois is a staple, right? So we can't talk about Pan-Africanism if we can't talk about him, right? Well, that's what Nkrumah did with Du Bois. I think there's no problem with that. I don't think there's a problem with that as long as people know. So in this book, I wrote the last case in it. It's two policy cases. The last case in there is the Liberian crisis. And what is important about that situation is the fact that things do go wrong. People who aspire to return to Africa would return in the wrong vein. And in many ways, I would say it mimicked, not in the genocidal ways, but in the discriminatory practices. It mimics the Israeli-Palestinian kind of thing, right? You have these people dubbed Americo-Liberians going back to Africa, creating a system of discrimination towards the indigenous African person, and that issue being the seed of many years of war in the country. I don't find it problematic to ask Africans from the diaspora to return to Africa as long as their minds are right. I'm gonna say it the short way. As long as their minds are right. As long as their consciousness is raised, as long as they have the values to understand that you are returning, and you are to do that in peace. You are to, and you should not be placing primacy on if you are returning to Africa, hopefully you subscribe to the primacy of Africa, and you are not going to utilize your Western indoctrination to marginalize or negate anybody else, right? These are some basic things that I think we should understand as human beings, but clearly things can go wrong even with us. And so I think if the consciousness is right, and obviously the material circumstances are right, then there's no problem with that. I would warn against someone who does not have the consciousness to be on the continent, because I'm not going to say it here, but there are two different type of diasporic Africans who will end up on the continent of Africa. Well, I can say there are those of us who are connected with the people, the history, and the land. And then there are those who come out of the diaspora who are going to play white in Africa. I'll say, let's make it plain. It is one place in the world where someone who is identifiably Black in the diaspora can play with their identity in Africa. And it's very problematic. And those are the ones I say, tell them don't come back. I'm just being very real. I'm being very real. I did live in Senegal. And so I know that there is more than one type of expat coming from the diaspora. There are those who want to connect and are coming home. And then there are those who are there to play white in Africa. Just gonna keep it real, you know? So that could be a mixed bag. You have to sift through. And hopefully the ones who are going to play white in Africa don't come back. That's the thing. But if there was in a group situation, because we have had the situation in Liberia, I would have to say we should be educated on how to avoid that and should learn from, you know, that contradiction, you know? Okay. All righty. You put me in an overdrive, and I will see you all. I am because we are. You're welcome.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Wright.
Yvonne, are you laughing? Are you laughing because of what I said at the end of the lecture?
Yes.
Well, I mean, good. I think it's good. You're laughing, okay? Because it's true. But okay. All righty.
Okay. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and stay safe.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.